Good evening, Belize, and welcome to XTV's news broadcast for Monday, April 11, 2025. Making the headlines tonight, first two cases of measles confirmed in Belize since 1991. Donated gun registry system will improve weapons control. And Transport Minister wants to digitize licensing process. We take our first break and return with the news in detail. Welcome back with your news. I am Drea Espinosa. Belize had not had cases of measles since 34 years ago, but that changed on April 12. That is when health authorities confirmed via laboratory testing that two unvaccinated teens aged 17, one male and one female from Cayo and Corozal, had contracted the highly contagious disease. They were part of a group of 15 persons from 4 different communities in Belize who traveled to Tijuana, Mexico from January 5th this year. They returned at the end of March and developed symptoms on April 2nd and April 3rd. The other 13 are asymptomatic. Of those, 11 are vaccinated. The isolation period for those who have been exposed to measles is 21 days. The Ministry of Health and Wellness today held a virtual press briefing to address our outbreak and discuss ramped up surveillance and vaccination. Belize started its vaccination for measles in 1973. Nonetheless, in 2024, Belize reported a vaccine coverage of 83.9%, though the target percentage is 95%. Coverage remains low in particular communities. The Cayo District and Belize District reported 73.5% and 79% coverage, respectively. The ministry is going into communities to increase our vaccine coverage, but Dr. Natalia Baer, our vaccine focal point today, stated that trust in vaccines has eroded since the COVID-19 pandemic. She and Dr. Melissa Diaz-Musa, the Director of Health and Wellness, shared who is supposed to get the vaccine.
The coverage that we shared with you is the coverage of the target population that receives routinely the MMR vaccine. So that is children below 2 years. The 39,000 is much more than what we need for that target population. But because of the outbreak, we definitely have to cover population outside of that age group. And we have received confirmation from Mexico that if we need vaccines, we can count on them for any amount. So vaccines, access to vaccines would not be a problem. Unvaccinated persons from 20 to 59, unvaccinated children and teenagers, unvaccinated healthcare workers. We are updating the census of the healthcare workers to ensure that everyone is vaccinated. Immune-compromised persons, pregnant women, and population living in low vaccination coverage communities.
And immunocompromised, just to add, would be persons who do not mount a significant immune defense. So diabetes is an immunocompromised state. Persons who have cancer, HIV infections. So it can be a wide array of persons. Even persons over 60, your immune defense can start to drop. So these persons, unvaccinated persons, should seek care and go to their nearest health center for their vaccine.
For children, the vaccine is usually administered in 2 doses, the first at 12 months and the second at 18 months. Advice was also provided for those who will travel, given that more and more countries are reporting outbreaks.
Any unvaccinated person traveling abroad and coming in contact with persons that may be infected with measles, more than likely will be infected with measles. So we have so many flights in and out of Belize, and if we look at the data in the US, a lot of destinations from Belize, they're having outbreaks. But I think the key message here is if you are going to travel, make sure you review your vaccination status. And ideally, you should get vaccinated before you're traveling, because these cases is just the perfect formula for importation. Unvaccinated and coming in contact with a person with measles. Now, the issue with measles is that the person is contagious even before having signs and symptoms. So it makes it more difficult for one to say, well, I will stay away from persons that are ill with fever and rash, but the contagious period starts even before that. So it makes it more difficult. But travel bans, so far, I don't think that's the way to go. The protection for the community starts with the protection of the individual.
The advice is to get vaccinated 1 month before travel. Dr. Espinosa discussed increased surveillance at our border points for visitors.
The process in Belize and in the Ministry of Health and Wellness is that we do have public health inspectors trained in surveillance at our borders and at the cruise ships. So the public health inspectors have numerous roles when they're at these border points. And one of the roles is in surveillance. And we have now, in fact, the regions are meeting today and some met yesterday to enhance this surveillance. So the enhancement basically means that we're actively looking for cases, reaching out to people who have been sick, because of course, a part of the public health inspector's duty at the border points, especially for the airport, is to look at the report that the captain sends out just prior to landing, identifying whether somebody is ill on flight, etc. And then we take action depending on that. But as Dr. Bear mentioned, we will also have posters. The public health inspectors do ask about fever. We try to identify early if there are any sick families in the group, or and we then give advice and isolate as needed. So this will be enhanced. We will more than likely, depending on the regions, because not all regions, the response will be the same. The borders, of course, are a little bit, the land borders might be different than the cruise ships and the airports. So we will adjust for each border, and we will enhance the surveillance at those places.
For those adults who do not recall if they have been vaccinated or don't have access to their vaccine card, they can be administered another dose. Unvaccinated persons who get exposed are recommended to get the vaccine up to 3 days after exposure to potentially provide protection or diminish severity. Measles is spread from person to person through droplets suspended in the air or on surfaces, or by direct contact with the nasal or throat secretions from infected persons. The droplets can remain contagious for 2 hours. The Firearms and Ammunition Control Board in the Ministry of Home Affairs today received from CARICOM Impacts an integrated digital firearms registration management system. The board solicited the assistance of CARICOM Impacts in January this year to strengthen the firearms management architecture in Belize. With this system, Belize will be able to register, monitor, and trace illegal firearms. The collaboration, which was also supported by the U.S. government, included training on stockpile management for our security services. Callistus Joseph, the Acting Assistant Director of Strategy and Innovation at CARICOM Impacts, shared that the system will improve regional collaboration and provided a practical example of how it will aid law enforcement.
All right, let me bring it down to the everyday use. Think of you as a law enforcement official. You are called to go to John Doe's home. John Doe, you heard there is a domestic violence happening there at John Doe's home. So on your radio or on your phone, you could call, or if you have access to the system, you could call the Firearms Licensing Board and you could ask, does John Doe have a firearms license? Or does he have a firearms? Think about your response if John Doe has a firearms, and think about your response if John Doe does not have a firearms as a police. That's one way you could use the system. One practical way you could use this system. And it's not about going through the millions of papers anymore. You simply put John Doe name, and then you will know if John Doe has a firearm. Think about going through hundreds of paper searching for John Doe name. So this is one practical way you could use the system in terms of your daily life, which will also protect you as a law enforcement official.
At the event, Minister of Home Affairs Honorable Kareem Musa highlighted the progress that has been made by the board to improve firearms management.
Working in collaboration with technical partners, the board participated in a comprehensive national baseline assessment to understand the current landscape of firearms and ammunition management. It also established a joint vetting unit comprising representatives from the Belize Defense Force and the Belize Police Department to ensure rigorous screening processes. In its pursuit of improved institutional coordination, the board strengthened interagency collaboration, particularly with the Customs and Excise Department, to enhance information sharing and operational efficiency. Additionally, a thorough audit of firearms management practices was undertaken in partnership with the Office of the Auditor General to identify gaps and reinforce accountability mechanisms. The board also participated in a strategic study visit to Jamaica along with the Jamaica Firearms Licensing Authority to learn from the best practices in regulatory compliance and public safety.
The minister also reported that they intend to acquire a firearms marking machine. Under the previous Briceño administration, there were issues in the Ministry of Transport to keep a steady and available supply of license plates and stickers. Now there is a new Minister of Transportation in the person of Dr. Louis Zabane, and he told us in a recent interview that they are looking at the possibility of having a system to renew licenses and apply for registration online.
That's one of the first things we discussed, and funds and I want to say thanks to CEO Shal for he did a great job in the short period he was here, and one of the things he focused on was to put in place the necessary funds to be able to procure, but not just procure in terms of getting the license plates into the hands of the Ministry of Transport, but also that while here that you have systems in place to inventory systems in place to be able to monitor the use of those, how they're being drawn down and serving the public. So we're also looking at digitizing our entire process across the country. That will be critical because we know how frustrating it can be for persons to go and stand sometimes in the sun, in the rain at these transport offices, for which we are committing to improve all of them across the country. But with technology today, you should be able to renew your license online. You should be able to apply for your registration, etc. So we're in the process now of looking at systems that could be put in place so that we can evolve into the 21st century, which we're in now. But if you're looking at the experience that we're having, you'd think that we're back decades ago.
In related news, there is a newly convened transport board chaired by Joel Cervantes. Deputy chair is Deborah Jones. The private sector representative is Clementina Castillo, while senior superintendent Colbert Flowers represents the police department. Russell Medina represents the Ministry of Infrastructure Development and Housing, and Thomas Shaw is the representative of the public transport providers. Peter Williams is the designate representative of the Chief Transport Officer. The board held its inaugural meeting today. Rise Belize, a national coalition of youth-led organizations, networks, and change makers, has written Minister of Youth and Transport Honorable Anthony Mahler and Minister of State Devin Daly requesting a meeting regarding the current and future director of the Department of Youth Services. Rise Belize says it wants to present the officials with a youth-driven recommendation and explore opportunities for genuine collaboration for the creation of a youth development framework that is, quote, inclusive, effective, and future-ready. They make the affirmation that they deserve more than token involvement. They want a seat at the table and say they are prepared to be part of the solution. At the same time, Rise Belize is inviting all youth leaders, youth-led groups, and networks across the country to stand with them. After the break, our Tillet bus catches on fire. Stay with us.
Farmacia Fritón, teléfono 22 32 87 6.
It has been a bad few weeks for our Tillet bus line from Orange Walk. On March 7, the bus line was blasted for the actions of one of its drivers who put the lives of passengers in danger to overtake in unsafe circumstances. That motorist was placed on suspension. On April 10th, the company recognized a driver who, during a collision with another vehicle, maneuvered his bus and avoided injuries to passengers. Now today, one of their buses caught fire from the rear at the engine while traveling along the Philip Golson Highway in Ladyville. It occurred at around 6:30 a.m. and the fire service responded to put out the flames. Fortunately, there are no reports of injuries. The case of Marvin Denver Plett and Lena Plett for manslaughter in the death of baby Ayana Bennett has been committed to the High Court for trial. That occurred on March 4, 2025. The case dates back to November 2023 when it is alleged that the foster parents from Spanish Lookout beat the 4-year-old to death over a teaching lesson about colors. While the post-mortem concluded she died from multiple trauma, the Pletts only admitted to lashing her with a belt over the span of 24 hours. The case of Wani, the horse being abused by a group of young men in Belize City, has led to calls for the strengthening of animal cruelty legislation, which provides only for a $100 fine, though there is confinement provided for the Belize Criminal Code for up to 6 months. There have also been calls for authorities to do something about horses that young boys have been roaming around with in the city, at least within the last year. The horses look malnourished with signs that they are not receiving the proper care. Mayor of Belize City, Bernard Wagner, was asked about the issue.
I know that from a Belize City Council or city standpoint, while it's not captured within the scope of any sort of legislation or any responsibility on the city council, it takes a community, and the mere fact that the community came out to highlight and to emphasize that this is not the behavior of how we would want to treat animals. That's a step in the first direction, in my view, that the authorities didn't have to say much. It was the people, the community coming out and saying, no, that is inhumane. And so we would want to see further strengthening from a legislative standpoint in terms of who is the authority on this. I know that there are other agencies that are involved or are chartered to do this sort of policing of animals cruelty, but the city stand ready along with local government, obviously, to see how we could enhance, and I believe it's a great opportunity for advocacy and an opportunity for change in the way we do business, change from a legislative standpoint as well, and having it be captured under some line of government ministry.
Our reports are that the horses came into the ownership of the young men after being set aside from use in the tourism sector when carriage rides were offered to tourists. Mayor Wagner was asked if the issue can't be tackled from a trade license aspect.
This event obviously opened doors for further consultation, further deliberations in respect to the Trade License Board. The Trade License Board that is the authority that grants license for businesses to some extent, and we would do for peddlers to some extent at the city level. Clearly, this sort of open up your eyes to how can we integrate ensuring that there is some measure of how do we look at the treatment of animals in conducting business. It can't be just that we want so much business open in a city It can't just be about driving local economic development. It has to be an integration of ensuring the stoppage of inhumane act towards animals. It has to be an integrated approach by across sector of the society, and so while there is nothing on the books, I believe this is a sort of starting point for us to really begin to capture this sort of activity in our day-to-day business at the council.
After the break, Africanized bees aren't bad bees, despite their reputation. Stay tuned.
20 years ago, items are available in Belize.
And with that, we have come to the end of our newscast. The repeat can be viewed on this station later tonight at 9 and again tomorrow at midday. Join us again tomorrow for another news broadcast. I am Drea Espinosa. Have a safe and enjoyable evening.